Afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the live stream. Tuesday before the Australian Grand Prix, a lot going on. As you can see, the pit lane is, I imagine right now, all the talk is going to be about the turbulent times in which we're now living and whether or not, of course, the Bahrain and Saudi Grand Prix are now in danger of being either postponed or cancelled, because we've already had explosions in both those countries as part of this new war. And it's interesting to speculate, actually, what would happen if that did happen. If those two races were, let's say they were postponed back half of the year, and hopefully by then things will be underway and we'll be back to relative normality. But I can imagine that there are two sides of the fence here. One is that Mercedes, who have just, if you like, conceded to having the technical regulations changed in June. In other words, for the first half of the year, they can run their very clever heat expansion compression ratio deal on their engines and get an advantage from that potentially. First half of the year. Second half of the year, that is going to be very heavily policed at 130 degrees centigrade. So in theory, all bets are off at that point, and they're not going to be doing it anymore. So you could argue from their point of view, make haste while the sun shines, absolute maximize performance in the first half of the year. And if two of those races are taken away, that is not a good thing from the Mercedes power unit point of view, well, Mercedes point of view, and indeed the Mercedes customer teams. On the other side of the coin, if you were, I don't know, Adrian Newey, Aston Martin, Honda, you'd be thinking, yeah, bring it on. Let's cancel as many races in the first half of the year as we possibly can and postpone them to the back half. So interesting discussions probably in this, as I say, in the pit lane there. That's actually, I can't deny that's 2025, but a lovely photograph anyway. Thanks to Spacesuit Media for that. And yeah, so lots going on. It's quite a difficult time, I think, just to be talking glibly about Formula One and whether we're pro or against the new regulations and deployment of energy and harvesting of energy and all that stuff. I mean, there's so many serious things going on in the world now. But anyway, I guess we all have to carry on in our own way and do what we can for humanity in our own way. And yeah, well, we have a motor race taking place this weekend in Melbourne, the opening round of the World Championship, and it's going to be fascinating. To make predictions about what will happen beyond the obvious, which is that the Mercedes powered cars are probably going to be in better shape than any other teams, and that Ferrari aren't bad either. Red Bull is kind of there or thereabouts, but maybe struggling a little bit more. Beyond saying that, it's very difficult to predict exactly what is going to happen. So we'll just have to wait and see. I suppose that's a good thing in a way. I mean, just what is going to happen. But if it is not very good, then immediately they go, of course, to the Chinese Grand Prix and then on to Japan. And that's a very, very hard stretch of road for the teams in the first three races in this new formula. Very difficult. And how they're planning that, I cannot even imagine, actually, the logistics going on, bearing in mind all the new stuff they're taking around anyway. Anyway, a bit of news, sad news from the weekend. We have quite a lot of sad news in the weekend, but this was particularly poignant, I thought, was that we lost the great Sandro Munari, admittedly at the ripe old age of 85. So he had a great innings. There he is on the left with Cesare Fiorio. In the golden days, you could say, of the Lancia Stratos in Alitalia colours. And Cesare there with his martini umbrella. Couldn't be, what a great era that was. Sandro Munari, one of the great, not only rally drivers, very great race driver too. Lovely tribute paid by Riccardo Patrese this week, who shared Lancia race cars with him, of course. But he will be synonymous with the immortal Stratos. It never looked better than in the Alitalia colours, I think. So, yeah, we lost Sandro Munari. The other big thing, as I've touched upon already, is this rule that's come in, which, I mean, let's look at the bit they've ruled out there, this is what it was before. It says, no cylinder of the engine may have a geometric compression rate higher than 16.0. And then it talks about the measurement. Procedure must be approved, blah, 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 the measuring system. Then in the new one, which is below that, it says... what does it say? It says it must comply with that, and it's going to be measured at 130. Now, if you were thinking, as quite a lot of people obviously were, with the original wording, well, we're not going to comply with that. We're actually going to make it 18 and we're going to expand it, and they're only measuring it in ambient, so we'll get away with that. Isn't that clever? And that was the gist of the argument. Is that bending the rules? Is that just reinterpreting the rules? What is that grey area? Well, you could say now they're going to measure it now from June the 1st for the back half of the year. In other words, when the engine, they're going to measure it at ambient as before, and then they're going to measure it at 130. So you could, the same cynics could say, well, in that case, we'll just make sure that, you know, at 131 it does something special. I don't know whether that's feasible or not, but, you know, that's where they're the measuring points. It's not the actual thing, the definitive thing. Any component assembly or integrated arrangement that is designed or functions to increase the compression ratio is prohibited, but then it was before anyway, and they still did it. So, yeah, you know, I don't suppose they could have worded that any other way, but we'll see. I guess everyone will comply with it because they all quite like to be good boys these days, don't they? I think the other thing to come back now to the main screen, I think the other thing is what it would have taken Mercedes to agree to do that. Bear in mind, they have got a significant advantage, and they wouldn't be changing the rules unless the FIA deemed it to be a significant advantage. And let's, I suppose, I mean, maybe Red Bull powertrains are in there as well. Not 100% sure about that, but let's just talk about Mercedes for the sake of argument. For Mercedes to be persuaded to give that up after half a season, as distinct from a full season, I think it's quite a big deal. And I think that's quite a political thing. And you wonder what might have happened there to make that happen. Now, one scenario in my mind is that maybe Red Bull powertrains do have the similar system, the heat expansion thing, the higher compression ratio when the engine gets hot. And I suspect that because they're not quite, they know Mercedes are their biggest opposition, they may well have gone to the FIA and said, well, let's stop it after 6 months. We'll do that. And, you know, I'm sure Mercedes will go along with it and we'll agree to it, sort of thing, and put Mercedes in a corner where they couldn't really refuse that situation. And because not that much to lose if you're Red Bull, but a lot to lose if you're Mercedes. So that could be one of them. It could be another favor for Mercedes, or a favor for Mercedes in return for agreeing to this. And we don't know what that would be, and whether that would ever be publicized or kept under the, well, it would be kept under the carpet, wouldn't it? I mean, it's like kind of reeks of 2009 for me a little bit, when we knew that Adrian Newey definitely was thinking of the double diffuser system that Ross Brawn brought into the Brawn and won the world championship with, and he kind of went away quietly. And the rumours around at the time, well, ever since really, have been that the FIA then kind of turned a little bit of a blind eye to some of the things Red Bull were doing in the following years, flexi wings, things like that. So I wonder whether there's any of that going on now with this, because to me, it's, you know, if you've spent all that money and development cost in doing something like that, if you're Mercedes powertrain, and then to have it only for 6 months, and then in those 6 months already 2 races appear to be in trouble, then, you know, it's quite a big concession to make, isn't it? But then again, Toto's quite good at conceding. He conceded that 2021 Drivers' World Championship fairly easily, without really kicking up a major international storm after the race. And just sort of, well, yeah, Max is world champion. And I'm not in any way impinging on Max's world championship there. What I'm saying is, I don't think Mercedes put up a strong enough fight on behalf of Lewis Hamilton that year after Abu Dhabi. And it's a little bit like that today, you would think. I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'm misreading that. But, or maybe, as Scarb says, there's not as much to the whole compression ratio thing as everybody's making out. And he may well be right there. There may be so many other factors that they need to get right in order to win a race that actually having a bit more power advantage from the ice is not really going to help too much. And that's possibly... that is a real scenario as well. But having said all of that, money is money and development cost is development cost. And to throw it away after 6 months is quite a big deal. Of course, the engine power unit budgets are part of the cost cap today. But nonetheless, it's a huge amount of money, a massive amount of money going into the development of this new power unit and everything that comes with it, whether it be the battery, the fuel development, everything else. Huge. I mean, I don't know what we'll be talking about, but hundreds of millions for sure. maybe somewhere in the billion, I would think, in some cases. And that's sort of amortized, I would guess, over a period of time. But in terms of the budget cap, but that wouldn't have been a cheap thing for powertrain developers to create that whole compression ratio thing, and for it to be gone in 6 months. So yeah, it could be that the Mercedes teams, which means the factory team obviously, and the customer teams, will have a bit of a power advantage in the first half of the year, which good luck to them, I say. They are creative and they've done it. And don't forget, from the point of view of Formula One, that still means pretty good racing, because there are a lot of customer teams out there. And there's a lot of talk at the moment about George Russell potentially world champion. But to do that, he's going to have to beat the two McLaren drivers, of course, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, excuse me. Speaking of which, we've had some surveys, polls on our channel, on the community side of our channel. Thank you very much, everyone who took part. And it's pretty clear that most of it, 60-40 approximately, 60% of you think that of the two McLaren drivers, Oscar Piastri is going to be the one who finishes with the most points at the end of 2026. I actually agree with that, partly because I think Lando will... I've seen it before, you see it with world champions before. It's such a struggle to get there, and there's so much pressure. And then when you do it, even if you try then to be completely focused, there is something inside you which says, oh, I've done it now. Yeah, I've done it. It's okay. And then that sort of slightly hungry edge has gone away. And obviously that's not gone away from Oscar Piastri. And he'll have not only wanting to win for McLaren the year after Lando won it, obviously from his point of view, but also to beat the Mercedes drivers. So that'll be a really interesting thing. Oscar versus George, you could say, in many ways, and Lando versus Kimi in many ways too. Kimi's going pretty well, isn't he? There's some suggestion that Kimi's going to be, Kimi's the next Lewis. I still, well, we'll get onto that later on. No doubt there'll be questions, but I still think Lewis, if you compare Lewis in 07, 08 with Kimi now, Lewis on fast corners just disappeared into the distance compared with Kimi, in my opinion. They're just so much quicker on fast corners. But on technical stuff, slow corners, yeah, Kimi's pretty good. Anyway, let's get on with it, and your questions and answers. We do have a live stream after this for backstage members. If you want to join the channel, I don't want to ruffle any feathers here, but we are putting some nice content together, hopefully for members when you cross the bridge, as it were. We've got Mark Slade will be joining us live for that, which will be good, just to talk a little bit more about all the things that I've touched on there, and indeed some of the question touch points you'll be bringing forward now. So yeah, looking forward to that. But in the meantime, we've got some good time now to do questions and answers. So let's get on with those. First is from Sarosh, who is indeed a member as well. But thank you very much indeed, Sarosh, for joining us on this one. Hi, Peter. I was following Hamilton in the early years. Yep, as weren't we all, I think. Well, a few of them were following Gary Paffett, I think, but most of us were following in terms of the next McLaren Formula One star. But yeah, most of us were following Lewis in his early years. He was definitely turning in earlier to what he's doing now. He looks just as smooth, but that initial introduction was there earlier. Yeah, absolutely. And I've always said that. And he's it's interesting. And I think it changed after Abu Dhabi 21, not necessarily because of the events of Abu Dhabi 21, but because of how difficult and shocking the Mercedes was from 22 onwards, really. Well, certainly in 22. And he just completely... He lost his confidence in the front end of the car and doing what he always used to do very naturally with the front end, and started to just give himself a little bit more room going into corners, braking later, probably in a straight line, but just making sure that he knew what the car was going to do before he really leant on it into the corner. And that's where it's gone away. Whereas, before he was always just doing that beautiful transition to an early turn in. But it's interesting now. He's saying, oh, I like these new cars. It feels like I've got my DNA back and this car suits my style and all the rest of it. I hope I'm wrong here, because I'd love to see Lewis do really well again. But I suspect it's because when the power is there, there's quite a lot of usable power to get the car straight or where you want it to be from rotation point to exit. and the cars are moving around a little more because they're running a little bit lighter. And I think it's that. I think he's enjoying that feeling, as indeed I think all the drivers are. And you're seeing that. We saw it in the Bahrain test. You see quite a lot of them just enjoying that feeling of just loading up the outside rear and just taking it out to the curb. And they can use the curbs a little bit more as well. And they're all loving that. But my fear is that that isn't actually what this is all about. I think everyone's going to be able to do that. I mean, Liam Lawson's going to be able to do that just as well as Oliver Behrman, who's going to do that just as well as Charles Leclerc. The problem, not the problem, the defining element of this, as always, and it's a good thing, is the entry to the corner. It's not that moment from power on application to getting the car straight. It's all about, it's a double whammy. It's not only about how you get the car into the corner and still keep the platform stable, but if you do that, a double reward now is going to be, you're going to have more energy harvesting through the engine as well. And that to me, if I'm right, that'll be quite a cool thing, because it really will highlight the drivers who are very, very good on the entry phase to the corner with a light back end and a car that is going to go into flick oversteer or something when they come out of the initial understeer that the car's going to have inevitably. So yeah, I think we'll see. And Melbourne won't be an easy circuit for that either, because it's green on Friday and it's, potentially wet overnight or even wet during the day, as we know, which means that in the shady areas the track could be a little bit damper or less grip, and there'll be leaves around. It's not a good circuit. There's a lot of camber as well at Melbourne. It's very easy to be sort of on the wrong side of the camber when you don't want to be. Turn one, good example, actually, going into the braking area, turn one. So yeah, of all the circuits you'd want to start with, I wouldn't have put Melbourne anywhere near the top of the list. It's great that it is the starting race, the Australian Grand Prix, wonderful Grand Prix, and best of luck to everybody involved with the organisation. But if you're a team owner, you wouldn't want to be starting in Melbourne, in my opinion. You'd want to be starting in, I don't know, Austin or Bahrain, somewhere like that. Well, Bahrain in normal circumstances, but not right now, obviously. So yeah, it's a good question though, but thank you very much. Right, let's move on to the next one. As again from Sarosh, we'll give you two because you are a member. Peter Mansell saying that the TC is in his foot, the traction control is in his foot. I keep wondering as to how Grand Prix drivers are able to feel every 0.1% of pedal movement and manipulate. Brilliant. Can the pedal cam catch this subtlety? No, there's no way the pedal cam could. I mean, if you're talking about Nigel in '92, when traction control came into the whole menu of things that he could use on the car. South African Grand Prix, I think, was the first time Riccardo Patrese used it, and because he was under quite a lot of pressure from Senna, and whenever Senna got close, they sort of put the TC sign out. But Nigel never used it in the race, and he memorably said, "Well, TC is my right foot." And of course, in a way, he's right, because he did have incredible feel, sort of Sergio Perez, Jenson Button, Kimi Raikkonen-like feel for application of power under load. And Nigel was very good like that as well. And no, you would not notice the difference if we didn't, but if we'd had pedal cams in the two Williams at that point, the difference between Ricciardo and Nigel and the way they're putting on the power, no way you would have seen it on the camera. We're talking absolutely tiny detail. In the same way that we're talking tiny detail with the steering inputs as well, and the braking and the way you come out of the brakes and how you modulate the brake pedal pressure against steering load. I mean, all of those things, tiny things. And as Rob says, Rob Wilson, they're not things that digital technology can encompass. That's why he's an analog man in a way, because there's nothing between the digits. It's just one digit to the next, even if you're doing it down to 1,000th of a millisecond. And it's less than that. It's a subtle thing. And that's why many drivers never, ever get to the point that Max is at right now, or Charles Leclerc's at, because they try to do it these days because of the technology and the data that's out of there. They try to do it on data analysis. And of course, it's not there. The only thing that enables you to do that is actual feeling the surface of the road. And it's all to do with the harmony of your inputs into the car in relation to the dynamic load that's going through the car at that specific millisecond. And if you're in perfect harmony and your body is just reacting through feet and hands exactly to what the car is doing and anticipating what the car is going to do and just trying to nudge the car into the next slight subtle change, that's when you're there. But that's what, 3 people in the entire population of the planet Earth, and it's it's an incredible gift to have that. Incredible gift. And it's not something that you can actually, as I say, you can generate from the garage. Drew C, thanks very much as well, Drew. Great to have you with us. Peter, what do you think of new regulations permits the teams that they can pull car out of parc fermé to change car setup for wet conditions without starting from the pit lane if the rain conditions say 40%? Yeah, I think anything like that is good. We had all that drama, didn't we, at Silverstone and Spa and places like that. And it's, yeah, of course you should be able to change the car. If Max gambles on it being wet and suffers in qualifying, and then not Max, I should say any driver, and then for some reason they delay the race until the point that the track's no longer wet on Sunday. Is that racing? Do people really want to see cars blasting past on the straight with a speed differential of 40, 50 kilometers an hour because one guy's running more wing than the other because he set it up for the rain? No, I think the weather is changeable at many circuits, and as good as the forecasting is, generally speaking, when you get to tracks like Spa, and let me think of some others. I mean, somewhere like Brazil, or I guess somewhere like Austin, it'd be fairly easy to predict if it was going to be wet or not, and exactly for how long it was going to be wet. But a circuit that's enclosed, I mean, Silverstone's quite a good example, not because it's enclosed, but because there's so much wind there that, local weather can change very rapidly. And Spa's the same, partly because it's undulating, you've got the forest, the trees, the whole thing's like a canyon going down the straight. And it's very difficult to be really, truly accurate on weather forecasting. So anything that allows the field to spread out. And let's put it another way. If you are the one guy that's benefited because you took the gamble and it did rain, then is that a great race either? To me, it's all about the gamble. The only gamble that should be out there in terms of weather conditions is a driver maybe deciding to start on slicks when everybody else is on intermediates. And I don't think you can do that now anyway. And that's the thing that they should allow still, because that is all about differentiating between the talents of drivers, some of whom would be very good or would make sure they wouldn't go off the island for 4 laps and then start to pick up positions. Whereas, some wouldn't. I'm just trying to think of the rule. The rule is that I think you have to do the formation lap and then you have to come in and they all start from the pit lane, don't they? But why do they do that? Why don't they just allow them to start on different tyres? I think I may be talking through my hat here, but I think there's some reason why you can't do that, right? You can't start on slicks if everybody else is on intermediates on the grid, I don't think. Maybe they think, it's got too much speed differential. Let's talk about speed differential off the line when we've seen the 2026 cars. Right. Lots of regulation changes that Drew's come up with here. Shows that we haven't done our homework. What's going on here? What is the point of changing quali 3 from 12 minutes to 13 minutes? And is plank wear gone with ground effect? Will Aramco have issues bringing fuel to Aston? F3, F2, if Saudi keeps taking hits. Thank you. No idea what the point of changing it from 12 to 13 is. I just assume that they probably did an average and realized that it was quite a few guys didn't get a lap in or something. If there was a slight delay, I don't know. It's got to be something like that, isn't it? Just making sure they're averaging out how long it takes to do an out lap, a flying lap, and an in lap. If you get caught with a weight check and you're coming in for your second set of tires, I guess it's that, is it? They probably averaged it out, done some sort of AI. Claude has got involved. Maybe it's that. To be 1 minute, it would have to be something like that, I would have thought. Is plank wear gone with ground effect? Yeah, I think it is, because they're not running as low. And I mean, Mark Slade would be better on that, but I think there's less potential drama around plank wear now. And we'll see. In fact, they're talking about anti-squat quite a lot, aren't they? So yeah, I think you'll see fewer plank wear dramas. And will Aramco? Well, I imagine they will. you know, it's not will Aramco, will motorsport have a lot of problems as a result of having so much of a vested interest now in the Middle East and Middle Eastern countries. That's the point, isn't it? It's not so much, oh, what about Aramco? It's what will motorsport do now that potentially the Middle East is off limits for a long time? Potentially, I use the word potentially, certainly some parts even as I speak. And that's, that will cramp the style of international motorsport big time, won't it? And Formula One in particular, because look how much money it's taken from the Middle East, and it's how much business it does with the Middle East. And Aramco is just one of them, and there'll be a lot of repercussions if this thing doesn't get sorted out pretty quickly and normality returned. But yeah, I mean, obviously motorsport has decided to take a lot of money from that region, and Aramco is part of that deal, and it could have an everlasting effect. So here we go. The first question, exactly as I predicted, from Zabish Duggal, who's another stalwart, been with us for a long time. Thank you very much. Do you think Antonelli will beat Russell this year? I really like him since we're of the same age, and he's super fast. And if not this season, when do you think he would be able to beat Russell? I don't think he'll beat Russell over a year, no. And in other words, if there's a Mercedes driver out there to win a world championship, I think it'll be George Russell. And I think George is quantifiably better than Antonelli at the moment on high speed change of direction and difficult fast corners. Turn 9 in Barcelona with a crosswind blowing would be a good example of that, what I just said, or Copse at Silverstone. So I mean, George is really good in those sorts of areas. I can't think of anybody better, actually. I mean, those are not places where you can do very much other than just be very subtle with the car and just be totally committed to what you're doing. And I think that's where George's main thing is. I think on slow speed corners and coming up to medium speed chicanes, Antonelli's right with George, maybe even slightly better than George, as you suggest. Super fast, as you say, very, very early turn in, very, very nice to watch, very, very neat and tidy. But I still say at the expense, I think, of how good he potentially is yet to be if he continues to grow as a driver on the faster stuff. So I think he would be capable of taking over at Mercedes if George left to go somewhere else and Max wasn't available and Toto Wolff was left with Kimi in one car and the best they could get in the other car would be, well, let's say the best. Let's say they hired, I don't know, Oscar Piastri in the other car. It'd be very, very close between those two, very close. And they both do a very good job. So, yeah, no, he's good. He's very good. I mean, he's right up there. I wouldn't have said he's any better overall than Isaac Hadjar, but he's very good. Aaron. Hi, Aaron. Hi, Peter. What would have to happen in the first few races for the FIA or Liberty to take drastic action with the technical regulations? What could those actions be? Well, I think now they've done that compromise thing on the compression ratio. I say compromise, now that they've basically ruined Mercedes' second half of the year for them. Will they make any more changes? I think the only changes now that may be made to the technical regulations, partly because they don't want to have, they just need to save face now, don't they? There have been too many already, and there are too many unknowns. But I think if in answer to your question, I can imagine the only things now that would come into play would be safety, changes the safety regulations to do with the start procedures, maybe to do with something else that may happen on track that we can't predict with these new cars. So I think anything safety related, yeah, it's still an open door there. But I find it very hard to believe now that they would do anything more on a sort of technical sporting level in terms of change. Orkan Stas, morning from New York. Morning to you. Well, it certainly is morning to you. It's very early. It was 11, I don't know, it was 6. Wow. Yeah, anyway, I hope you're having a nice morning. I think it's probably still quite cold there, is it not? Curious about the potential logistic complications Formula One could face from an extended Iran conflict. For example, if the race was this weekend, would Abu Dhabi even be possible? No. I think right now, if Saudi, Bahrain or Abu Dhabi, or Qatar for that matter, Qatar, was the opening race, they would be cancelled for sure, or postponed. Let's use the word postponed because Liberty seemed quite good at postponing races rather than cancelling them. And bear in mind it's only a month away 4 short weeks that we're doing Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So based on what's coming out of Washington at the moment, it's going to be quite a long conflict. There's a long way for this to go. And based on how many stray missiles are flying around that region at the moment, not the least of which was friendly fire from Kuwait, I think. Have just brought down 2 American aircraft. Then, in my opinion, it would be foolhardy for Formula One to go to that region right now, and probably will be in a month's time. Again, we shouldn't forget that it was Zach Brown was very welcoming of Donald Trump a couple of years ago, I think, in Miami. I think it was Miami. Welcome to Formula One, and he was the big guest at McLaren. So maybe we'll get Zach to lean on Donald and get the whole thing stopped. I don't know. I'm being slightly facetious, I'm being very facetious. But at the same time, Liberty, I think, I think they're pro-Trump, if that's the right phrase, bearing in mind there's a big sort of wall between various factions in America now, either pro or against. I think Liberty fall on the side of the fence of being very pro-Trump. And so they will, in theory, hopefully have some sort of inside track on what is going on and be able to continue in some sort of fashion. But, nothing is a given. Nothing is a given at this stage. Again, from Savage Duggle, there are multiple sources suggesting that Aston will run in qualifying and do the formation lap before retiring. Shades of 2005 Indianapolis with the Michelin runners. Apparently they're forced to do that. How bad could it be? And is it over for Aston Martin? Well, it would be terrible. And it would be a terrible thing for Honda more than Aston Martin, because right now it looks like most of the deflection is in the direction of Honda. And for them in that region to be doing that, with the Chinese and Japanese Grand Prix coming up immediately afterwards, is a huge problem, isn't it? Terrible image for Honda in that region. Well, all over the world, but in that region particularly. So that could well be what happens. I agree with you. It could well be what happens. And they've had a little bit of time, not a lot, to try to get the battery, we assume it's a battery overheating issue, sorted. And as Gavin White said in the chat we had with him last week, if you haven't seen that, really interesting content from Gavin, who his company About Energy does a lot of simulation and modeling of batteries, a world leader, working with companies like Porsche and Mercedes, but not Honda. And he was saying, the overheating could be caused by a number of things. It could be an internal thing to do with the cells. It could be, could be solved by aero, but we don't know. We're not privy. It's a shame. Just as an adjunct in brackets now, isn't it a shame that we don't know? Because, as I said, I've just said many times on this channel, Formula One loves to talk about how it is the pinnacle of technology, and what we're doing in 2026 couldn't be more pinnacle of technology. I mean, it's so cutting edge that nobody in the teams seems to understand it, let alone anybody else. But anyway, it loves to portray its DNA as being the pinnacle of technology. And there is nothing more compelling right now than knowing exactly what the problems are at Honda and Aston Martin, and how these very brilliant people are going to solve the problems. Isn't that a great story? But that story will never be told, not even 5 years from now. And we'll certainly get no access to it at all now, because, it's got to be secret. And yet Formula One sells itself on all this wonderful technology. And I've said many times, technology is about people. And it's about the brilliant brains of the people at Honda and Aston Martin who are going to solve this problem. They will. I don't know how long it'll take, but they will. And for the public to know what's going on, is this solution going to work? Is that solution going to work? Are they going to do 1 lap in the race? Can they do 10 laps? Can they do the whole race? It's a shame we're not privy to any of that anymore. And I say that purely because I can sit here as somebody who went through an era of Formula One when team owners and engineers were happy to talk about that technology, whether it be Colin Chapman, Mauro Foggieri, Harvey Postlethwaite, or Derek Gardner at Tyrrell. If there was an issue, they weren't ashamed of that. They thought it was an interesting thing to solve. And in Formula One, it's like everybody's ashamed when something goes wrong. Look at the last question. Look at the last point. Is this the end for Aston Martin? Well, I was thinking about that this morning when I was out, actually just on the way back from the school run, because I mean, let's say Aston Martin have 3 horrendous Grand Prix and they basically don't do a lap in all 3 races, the first 3 races. That's 3 races in theory out of 24. Okay, maybe 20 now or something like that. It's still a lot. It's still a big championship, even if it's 20. And put it another way, if say McLaren won the first 3 races and then in the next 3 races they were on the pole, led the races, but then failed to finish every race, would everybody be saying, is this the end of McLaren? 3 DNFs in a row? Of course they wouldn't. It's just the context in which you have to see things in life. And the context of Aston Martin is, yeah, terrible start, 0 points, but for sure they can only get better from here. In the context in McLaren's case is, well, 3 DNFs in a row, but we know how good they are. For sure they'll come back and win more races. So there's always a context in which this needs to be seen. And so, yeah, it won't be good. It won't be good from a PR point of view. It won't be good from every point of view, but it will pass for sure. And the next point, and this is me now just sort of extrapolating from that, is how I've been saying a lot over the last 12 months of how I felt Adrian Newey and to some extent Andy Cowell was the super team, and that it's going to be very difficult to beat them in 26, and they could well win the World Championship with Fernando Alonso. Now, obviously, they're in a lot of trouble right now, and I suspect they're in so much trouble now that they can't win a World Championship in 2026. I still think they can win Grand Prix this year, and I think they probably will at the end of this, towards the end of the season. But I question, when I make it's not a faux pas, but when I make a call like that and it doesn't look good, and obviously it's not correct at this point, why did I make that error? And I've been thinking about that quite a lot. And I think there are 2 elements here. One is I'm shocked, completely shocked, that Adrian Newey hasn't done a better job of organizing Honda in a way that works seamlessly with the very avant-garde car that he's designed. Because obviously in his mind, he's designed the ultimate car from his point of view, and he hasn't left any margin there for overheating, for this or that. Battery's not working, go to a bigger, heavier battery, whatever. This car that he's designed is obviously right on the edge. And from that, you can obviously gather that in his mind, the Honda engine power unit thing was a plug-in performance factor that would just do the job and be there, up there with everybody else, which is, bearing in mind what we now know, which is a massive mistake. So how could Adrian have done that? Bearing in mind he has so much experience of working with Honda from the Red Bull powertrains anyway, days anyway. And he knew how to set up Honda because he helped do it when they moved from McLaren to Red Bull up to Milton Keynes. So he knows all that. And on top of all that, he's got Andy Cowell there. He ran Mercedes powertrain for all that time. So how is it between those 2 guys, they weren't able to get Honda to focus on what was important, not to waste time going down blind alleys on things that were going to cause trouble, like the V12 engine they did for McLaren towards the end of their time, the first time round with McLaren, which was a complete joke, too heavy, too much fuel, completely unnecessary. We know Honda do that sort of thing if they're not tightly controlled. And what this reeks of for me is a Honda that's back where they were when they rejoined McLaren and not tightly controlled. And I find that extraordinary. And I don't know why. I still haven't got an answer in my head as to why Adrian would have let that go and wouldn't have been on top of that. Which leads me on to my second point. The only thing that I can say now is that this business of buying the best of everything never works in Formula One, because there are too many, you require too many building blocks. You require too much organic growth in a logical way for one step to lead to the next. And the minute you try to jump steps and you plug in an Adrian Newey from here and an Andy Cowell from there, and you bring in Honda when they've decided to pull out, and now they're coming back in again because they're a great company, and we're going to spend all this money on a new factory, and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. It never works. BAR kind of did the same thing. Massive amount of money, and it didn't work. The super team, 1974 super team, Viceroy cigarettes, biggest cigarette sponsor in America, bigger than Marlboro at that point, spending a fortune on Mario Andretti, Al Unser, Joe Leonard, Maurice Philippe, the star designer from Lotus. And the car was a disaster. The whole team was a disaster. Too much money, too many people, all thinking they knew the answer. And I guess, and I'm assuming that's kind of what's gone on at Aston Martin. Adrian's gone there because, forget about any personal things, he's always had this burning ambition to want to create a team almost from scratch and grow organically, and for it to be his team with his cars, with his drivers, and do everything as a racer would. And I absolutely, totally support that. I think that's a great way. It's absolutely the right way for him to think, and that's what's driven him on all these years. And I guess he was unsettled at Red Bull, but I guess at Aston Martin he saw an opportunity to get further into the ground floor and to recreate the team as it is at the moment around his vision of how to do the team. But I think he's probably made a mistake there, thinking that he could create that organic growth very quickly and jump some steps. Because even though he's team principal, there's a guy called Lawrence Stroll who's a chairman, and it's not the same thing as it being Frank Williams Grand Prix Racing, Frank Williams Racing, or Williams Grand Prix Engineering. It's not the same thing at all. And Adrian, I think, is a victim of this whole super team thing of too many people, too much money, lots of opinions going on, and not enough time just growing organically and calmly. And I think that's what's happened. And I never imagined that would happen. I'll tell you the reason I didn't think that would happen, that they would be a victim of this thing. It's because we're in the budget cap era. And you would assume, as I did, that in the budget cap era, it would make things much leaner and much easier not to fall into the trap of the super team failure syndrome. It would be much easier then to grow organically as the way Adrian wants to, because of the budget cap. But of course, that highlights one of my objections and complaints and criticisms of the whole budget cap thing, which is that behind the scenes, there's obviously still a massive amount of money that can still be spent the wrong way. And that's what's going on. I think there's too much emphasis on everything, on the sponsors and the PR and everything else. There's too much chaos. And when you see very good racers like Tom McCullough, who's just a pit wall engineer par excellence, being moved sideways, I mean, you got to think, what is going on there? You know, there's somebody there who doesn't actually understand motor racing, if that's the case. Because Tom McCullough should not be wasted in the whatever he's doing now at Aston Martin, and that was always a bad sign. And I don't think it's a problem with the whole team principle thing of Adrian, because as I say, he'll just delegate and focus on exactly what he wants to do, which in his mind is create the car he wants to build and go racing with the drivers that he can work with and get on with it. But I think it's got ahead of him. I think it's overtaken him, that the whole super team syndrome. And when you think about people like Mario Andretti being involved in that super team at the time, and he was unable to do anything about it, then Adrian won't be able to either. Not with the Strolls there. It's too strong a thing, too big a bubble to burst. There's no, and the opportunity to grow organically in that team, we now know, is going to be very, very difficult, very small, very small. Anyway, said all that. Hope it makes some sense, and we will have more comments, obviously, when we see exactly how Aston do. I have no doubt that car will be quick, and I have no doubt that they will get it together. I'm just shocked at the time frame that they're now going to have to conform to, and I repeat the point. I'm shocked at the terrible job, really, that Adrian and Andy Cowell have done managing Honda. I don't blame Honda at all, because everybody knows Honda. They've been easy to read since 1964. It's the same company, regardless of whether they're changing personnel. That's irrelevant. They always change personnel. They always needed to be managed and managed well. And I didn't think there would be two better people in the pit lane to manage them than Adrian and Andy Cowell, but they haven't. That's the bottom line. Right, get on to the next one. Bit of a rant there, I know, but wanted to get that off my chest. Hope you don't mind. Sujo. Hi, Peter. Isn't it funny how everyone kind of underestimated Ferrari going into 26? With the experience they have with sustainable fuel and V6 hybrids in WEC, the clickbait rumour media to blame. Yeah, good point. I think ultimately it's not always going to be, I mean, in my evaluation of how Ferrari were going to go into 26, I assumed they would do a slightly better job with the car because it wasn't very good last year. but they were getting better, kind of, and they've had a year of not having Adrian and knowing how to move forward, and that's gelling reasonably well. But I never really related what they've been doing in WEC to how it might benefit them in Formula One, and I still question whether that is a true relationship or not. It's quite different, really, from the way they're doing the technology. There's certainly some interchange, and certainly from a fuel point of view, it's not bad at all. But I think the main thing that's happened at Ferrari is that they're kind of racer friendly now, aren't they? I mean, for me, the going to smaller turbos than the norm is a hugely praiseworthy decision. It's absolutely right up the street of a driver that wants less lag and just general maneuverability for the car. Smaller turbos have got to be better. When you've got everything else going on with with the electric side of the engine, the turbos being smaller is definitely a step in the right direction. Whether that was Fred, whether that was the engine department, I don't know. But somebody's made a very, very good decision there, and they've done a very good job. And I suppose the other thing I felt was that because the regulations aero were changing, it might help Ferrari a little bit because they weren't going too much further down the whole ground effect route. And if you could take some of that away, Ferrari might come back with something that could be reasonably efficient. And I think that is the case. They've done that, and they've done that very well. So, yeah, I don't know what other people were saying, but I never felt Ferrari would be out of it, and I always felt that Ferrari would win Grand Prix in 26. Never thought they'd be in the running for the World Championship, but I stand by that, and I think they will win Grand Prix. And I think Lewis will win a race or two. I really hope so. He seems to be quite fired up. All of the things mentioned at the start of the show notwithstanding, all of those things mean that I think Charles on any given day will beat him, but I think Lewis will nonetheless get in a position in some races where he can win, and that could well happen. Sujo again, as for the racing that purists claim they want to see, the WEC provides that in spades. I think one glance at the highlights of the 25 6-hour Spa is enough for a pure fan to get hooked. Okay, well, we're talking about WEC there, but good. Yeah, I think WEC is on the way up. There's a lot of cars, a lot of teams, a lot of laps, a lot of, whether WEC will ever be what it was, in my mind, when it was Gulf Porsche versus factory Ferraris, and it was the Grand Prix drivers in those cars on their off weekends, I don't know. To me, I don't know. I just don't get quite as fired up about WEC as I used to, but I take your point. I definitely take your point. Thank you for that. Tim Green, hi Peter, thoughts on the first Formula One race in Australia? Also, how often do you visit Australia? From Tim in Sydney. Hi, Tim. Haven't been back to Australia for a couple of years now, but have been back many times since I grew up there. Love the country still. First Formula One race in Australia. You've phrased that quite well, haven't you? Because there were lots of Australian Grand Prix before Adelaide 85, but they weren't necessarily for Formula One cars, even though they were... Excuse the weirdness of this. They were Formula One cars, but with different engines, bigger engines actually, quicker than Formula One cars. So the first proper motor race I ever saw as a kid, I can still remember it. I can remember the build-up more than the actual race actually. It was the 63 Australian Grand Prix at Warwick Farm, which was the first win for Jack Brabham in his own car, BT3. Lovely car, turquoise with a silver nose stripe, and I remember the car arrived late, and he actually did a warm-up session at Oran Park early on Sunday morning and brought it back to Warwick Farm and won the race. It was incredibly hot. Graham Hill was in the four-wheel drive Ferguson, but the new world champion was there. He was the new world champion. Can you believe that? He'd only clinched a championship like 6 weeks beforehand. He's in this four-wheel drive Rob Walker Ferguson. John Surtees in the Bowmaker Lola, beautiful car, really quick. Bruce McLaren in a factory Cooper Climax, Denny Hulme, and so on. So Chris Amon was in that race in an old Cooper. Anyway, Jack won it. David Mackay was super quick as well in the Brabham. And that was that. But the 85 race was Adelaide, was the first round of the World Championship for Australia. And we came to Adelaide and we just loved it. Adelaide, the town was just the right size for a Grand Prix. The circuit was brilliant. Everything was wonderful there. And we'd just come off, I was with Williams at the time, we'd just come off 2 wins, Brands Hatch and Kyalami, both of which Nigel had won. And Nigel was on the pole again in Adelaide. Very good. But he didn't win the race. He had a problem. I can't remember what it was now, but Keke won the race in the other car. And I remember it was about 3 in the morning, and I was asleep in my room in the Hilton, and the phone rang. Unbelievable noise coming out of the receiver of rock music and stuff, and then Keki's voice coming on the phone saying, Windsor, how good is Mansell now, eh? And just put the phone down. Because Keke was not a Mansell fan at that point, nor was he a Windsor fan, because he associated me with Nigel a lot, even though I was the sponsorship manager at the time and trying to do the best I could. But to do a good objective job, in my opinion. But anyway, Keke didn't see it that way. And I remember that bit. I'll never forget that. Thanks, Keke. I did actually get back to sleep, though. JPS 78 MA. There's a good name for you. Speaking of which, you see that I was a little bit perturbed by this. Cadillac put out a thing saying Mario Andretti to be honoured with the naming of the first Cadillac Formula One car, which suggests that not all of them will be named MAC, Mario Andretti Cadillac Mac. Why wouldn't they be? I mean, why change the nomenclature after 1 year? I hope they continue forevermore to be called Max, and I'm sure Mario enjoys that. Bearing in mind the Mack truck was, something that he would be quite familiar with as well, an American Mack truck. But anyway, I'm sure it's going to be quicker than a Mack truck, and there it is. It's got the Mario Andretti initials in the name of the car. Anyway, getting back to it, JPS 78 MA. Hi, Peter. Does an ICE with an 18:1 compression ratio have more effective battery recharge and engine braking than an ICE with a 16.1? How the hell do you expect me to know that? I would have absolutely no idea. I can only guess and say, yeah, because the more, I don't know, is it more revs you'd run, or was it that whenever you come out of when you got the compression of the engine, I imagine that's when you're getting a lot of the energy back, and you'll have more of that compression, would you not, when you're coming out of the throttle, and therefore you get more charging? I don't know. I'll ask Mark Slade that in the members backstage live stream after this. And so all you have to do is join and get the answer. There you go. Good question, though. Thank you very much. Semtex. We won't mention Semtex at this time of the year. Good morning, Peter. Good morning to you. Samad Ragan. Hi, Peter. Hola, Peter. Not exactly looking forward to this season with the ridiculous new regulations. Fingers crossed anyway. Well, I think you speak for a lot of us. And, I don't think anybody really knows how it's going to turn out. I mean, from the team's point of view, bear in mind that everybody has a job and they just sort of get on with their job, don't they? Oh, this guy does fuel consumption analysis, and this guy sweeps the garage floor and makes sure the nose of the car's clean between runs, and this guy does the fuel out the back of the garage, and this guy does. Everybody's just focused on their own little job, and very few people in the pit lane actually are thinking, oh, what are these regs going to be like? What's this race going to be like? Is it good for Formula One? Is it good for the fans? Everybody's so focused on what they're doing, they don't have time to think about all that rubbish. They just think about, we've got to get this car on the grid and get it going. And I don't think they have any clue really of what's going to happen next. I'd be shocked if they do, because there are so many unknowns out there, particularly after what we've seen in Bahrain. I think it's pretty clear Mercedes will be looking good. And just another thing about that, actually, whereas Adrian on one side with the Aston Martin quite clearly assumed that everything would be fine on the power unit side, which is why he's designed this car with zero room for any sort of, changes. Whereas Alpine went the other way, switching from Renault to Mercedes power units. They built a very basic car that allows them to be very adaptable to anything that they didn't know or couldn't foresee in that power unit switch. So all credit to them. Bearing in mind they've got a very quick driver in Pierre Gasly and a half reasonable driver in Franco Colapinto. And they've got Steve Nielsen there now, who's got a clear head. I think Alpine, you can expect to see Alpine doing quite well, or Gasly anyway. Mr. Bungle 20077. I mean, sure, Mercedes will win at 90%, but I can't recall the last time a big regulation happened and we had such unknowns. Ferrari look amazing. How much did they show? Well, the rumor is that Ferrari showed a lot in Bahrain and couldn't have got a lot more out of the car, but whether that's the case, we'll have to wait and see. As ever, very good with the smaller turbos, very good off the line as well at the start, so that'll be a good thing. When you say Mercedes will win at 90%, it's like, well, you know, be a walkover. But what does that mean? That means all the Mercedes-powered teams. It doesn't just mean Mercedes factory team. And right now, I can't imagine why anybody would think that Mercedes have got a better car than McLaren or are going to do a better job than McLaren over the season. So if it, you know, at the very worst, if you like, it could come down to a really big battle between George and Oscar Piastri, with Lando there or thereabouts and Kimi not far away, which would be a great world championship, would it not? And then you got the Ferrari factor, as you correctly say, with Ferrari potentially winning Grand Prix, which I think they will. And who's going to discount young Maximilian Verstappen either? And Red Bull. You know, Max isn't going to go and just sort of disappear, is he? He's going to be right there. So regardless of what any of us say, there are a limited number of things that they have to do or not do. Some of them are going to do a lot better than others, but in general, they're going to come together and basically we are going to have some racing and we are going to have quite a good championship. I think if your definition of a world championship is quite a lot of different winners, I think there will be that. If your definition of a world championship is a championship decided by unbelievable motor racing by incredibly skillful drivers on the absolute edge of what they do with the balance of the car at any given moment, I think you'll be disappointed because a lot of the races I think will be defined by, you know, how you harvest and deploy the energy and, you know, boring things like that. But you just have to accept that these days. That's no different. I remember when I first joined Autocar magazine, 75, Stuart Bladen was the chief road tester. And Autocar is, and certainly was, a brilliant magazine. In terms of road car testing, it was the best in the world, no doubt. And they had 4 or 5 on the road test team, and Stuart was the #1 guy. And he's also UK's best fuel economy driver. They used to have these things called fuel economy runs. I don't know whether they have them anymore. And it was standard road cars, and you'd drive from, I don't know, London to Edinburgh, and not using motorways. And whoever used the least fuel was the winner. And Stuart used to win these things all the time. And one of the things he did was take his shoes off. He drove in socks, so he'd have absolutely perfect feel for the throttle. Which brings me back to saying that if this Formula One is about how you deploy the energy and how you manage the cars over the lap to get the energy back again, a lot of that could well be softly, shoes off, socks. I'm not saying that in real life, obviously. I'm just using that as an example. But you get my feeling. It's all about softness of touch and making it all work in a very harmonious way. Then that kind of yeah, okay, well, that is Formula One then. If it isn't that, and this is where I have my problem with comparing WEC with Formula One, and it's more about organized efficiency of fuel saving and energy harvesting, and it really is something that's beyond this, that doesn't differentiate between a Liam Lawson and a Max Verstappen, then I think Formula One's going to be horrendous. All we can do is just look at it and basically record the results. But I don't think then it will be worthy of a championship that can be compared with Fangio going down through the S's at Rouen 57 in perfect four-wheel drifts in a 250F Maserati, or Jim Clark pulling out 5 seconds over Graham Hill in the rain on well-worn race tyres, dry tyres in the 63 French Grand Prix, or you know, Lewis Hamilton or Max pulling off any of their genius tricks that they pulled off over the years, or even Charles for that matter. And if it comes down to a very mechanical thing, that's wrong in my opinion. Ollie Evans 264. Hi Peter. Do you think Aston will finish the Australian Grand Prix? Feels crazy to be asking that. Doesn't seem to be. I don't think. I mean, if you were saying, do you think they'll start? That's one matter. Finish, maybe not. No, I don't think they will. No, is my answer. No, I don't think. Super chat here from Cameron. Hi, Cam. Cameron. The Cameron. Ollie Berman said Verstappen is the best Formula One driver ever. Are you buying or selling? Well, I must ring young Ollie and see whether he has done a lot of research on the steering inputs and throttle brake applications of Alberto Ascari, compare and contrast with one manual Fangio, I think, before he starts saying the best ever. I'm being obviously very cynical and supercilious, but I'm a huge Ollie Berman fan, as I think, as you probably all know, but and get on with him very well. But I think to say the best ever is over the top. Probably misquoted Max as ever. They probably say, "Who's the best? Who's the best driver?" You know, you've seen Ollie. Oh, got to be Max. You know, probably a misquote, I would think. Well, taken out of context, anyway. Anyway, I will definitely get Ollie on. Actually, we'll do that at some point of the year, and I won't tell him what the question is. I'll say, right, Ollie, compare and contrast Alberto Ascari's steering input with that of one manual Fangio, and to make it easy, they're both driving Lancia Ferraris. Let's see what he says. Yeah, there you go. I'm not going to get through all these, am I? I'm going to have to have a look at this whole thing a bit, make it a bit bigger so I can see how many questions we've got to get through. Quite a lot. Try and get through them relatively quickly, or as many as I can. There's a green one here. Welcome to level 1. That's joining as a member. That's Luke Mifsud. Thank you very much, Luke, for joining. Very kind. Noisy Boys says, hey, Peter. Mickey Cypher says, hey, by the way. Lewis for 8th. Ferrari will be the most consistent across the season, I feel. Charles not consistent enough in races. So there you go. Lewis is going to win his 8th World Championship. Charles is going to be inconsistent in races. It's funny. My take on Charles is that he's a bit inconsistent in Friday and even qualifying sometimes, but he's pretty good in races. But anyway, that's just me. Lewis, 8th. Well, he's going to have to beat all those Merc runners out there, and Charles. But would I be the first? Would I complain if Lewis won an 8th World Championship? I'd be the first guy in the world to say retribution for Abu Dhabi 21. Good day from Madrid, from Diego. Hey, Diego, how you doing? Nice to hear from you. Another one from JPS78, Mario Andretti. Hi, Peter. Given the struggles the drivers have had to date, is this the most difficult season to be a reserve driver? Well, I think any season is difficult to be reserve. And, the whole business of the reserve drivers is just ridiculous, in my opinion. They're standing around in the garage with the headset on, and they should be in race cars. And we should have another championship anyway below Formula One with all the old cars and all the reserve drivers and others competing. As I've said lots of times on this channel, there is room for another championship out there, and we should have it. And it would get away, and it would give all our young talent something to do. As it is, they're all migrating to IndyCar or WEC, and it's a shame. So many good guys just will never get to see in Formula One. Completely wrong. But I would imagine that at the moment, if you're the reserve driver for Aston Martin, I'm not sure who that is, but anyway, if you are, I can't imagine you're going to think you're going to get many laps, because when the car does run, they're going to want their 2 team drivers in there, aren't they? Pete looking well, King. Quite sure what that means. Pete, is that me? I don't know. Do I look well? Well, if I do, thank you very much. Jason Joe Laviat. How difficult is it for a team like Ferrari or Williams or Alpine Renault or even Mercedes to return to past glory? Red Bull is the only team recently to get back to the top after falling off. Yeah, I mean, teams that are winning a lot and then fail to win, it's usually because key members have changed, or the engine supplier has gone away, or tyre situation has changed in terms of tyre company. That's in the past anyway. And so it's almost like starting from scratch again. I mean, I remember when we went from Honda to Judd engines at Williams, and 1 minute we're winning Grand Prix with abandon with the Honda, and the next minute we're running the Judd and struggling. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was a different category of racing we were in at the time. It was nothing more than that. And you just have to buckle down and do what you do and keep going and know that one day it'll come right again, and believe in that. And that's how we did it. And it's not good, but it often happens. the world is constantly changing. Look what's going on in the Middle East right now. Everything is changing all the time. We're all getting older. Babies are getting born. Sadly, people are passing away, and things change. So it's a question of adaptation. But when some of those variables are very big variables, like Honda pulling out, or Goodyear pulling out, or Michelin pulling out, or Ayrton Senna sadly having his accident, things like that, those are the things that cause the big changes. Jason Joe Levitt again. They've all dominated, but once their streak ends, they don't seem to be able to get back. Yeah, well, that's basically what we were saying. Yeah, they don't. Right. Tim Collins. This is from Tim for Australia again. Hi, mate. 3 months, not 6. Well, yeah, you're right. It's 6 months. I'm saying 6 months of the year: March, April, May, June. Yeah, it's 3 months of enjoying it. You're right. Yeah, you're right. I haven't even looked to see what that is. So it's not many races, is it? And if you take out Bahrain and Saudi, it's very few races now that they'll have that advantage. Thanks for pointing that out. What about Ferrari? And Tim continues, what about Ferrari allowing the turbo spinning uptime, losing their advantage? I think the small turbos are better, aren't they? Isn't that what I think that's what all the feedback is that we're getting. Quite sure I understand that. Sema Dragon, Papaya rules handed Lando the WDC. Well, did they? Did they suddenly say to Oscar Piastri, you've got to give this win to Lando Norris? No, I think there was a moment when Oscar was not very quick, and Lando took advantage of that and got his confidence and really won it under pressure at some moments when Oscar was kind of going very well again. So, I mean, the interesting thing, not that I've watched it, but some mates of mine are saying that the latest Drive to Survive doesn't actually cover that whole mess at all. Seems extraordinary, but anyway. Right. Where are we going? 964 Cuplove says, most stupid by the FIA to include any measuring method in the working of the rules. Just put the 16.1 in the rules and check whichever way you want, period. Yeah, I agree. To start specifying when they're going to measure the rules, it's like saying, oh, well, you can go out and do whatever you like in qualifying, but when you come back from the garage, we got to make sure all the cars are at the weight limit. Yeah, duh. That's what it used to be like, of course. So that's why Nelson used to go in, put the old heavy Alfa Romeo rear wing on the back of the car and wheel it into the Parc Fermé. Oh, yeah, car's legal. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, right. Right. Hermione Bull says, what's the prevailing feeling at the start of this season with these much discussed new rules? Excitement or worry, or both? I think at the moment, everyone in the pit lane is more worried about the international tension than they are about the new rules, actually. I think that is the talking point. Will we have Bahrain? Will we have Saudi? Sema Dragun, he's replying to Jason Joe Levitt. He says, because the word scuderia, your stable is only as good as your thoroughbreds speaks volumes. Yeah. Isn't it a great word, scuderia? And when I was a kid in Australia, the Australian team was Scuderia Veloce, stable of speed, which is David Mackay's team, of course. And did he have some great cars? All those beautiful Dino Tasman Ferraris, the Chris Amon, Bill Brown, Ferrari 330 P4 Spider, lots of Brabham Repcos, beautiful. David Mackay, miss him a lot. Very intelligent man, great writer, and a wonderful racing driver. So Hatchie says, hear me out, Peter. And third car for reserve drivers to race the sprint weekends. You can't sacrifice a crash in a sprint with only 2 cars. Sprint race championship for reserve drivers. Yeah, well, yeah, a similar thing. I just don't think it should be part of the Grand Prix menu. I think it should be a separate championship in which all these third drivers and young stars are taking part in the previous year's cars. Of course, it would be embarrassing now, wouldn't it? Because most of them would be quicker than the current Grand Prix cars. So that would be an issue. So Samadringen says, we worry because it's all about batteries and battery management. Not a good look for racing, flat out racing. Luke Mifsud. Hi, Peter. Hope you're well. Will Ferrari dominate? ? Let's say they are in with a chance. What's your opinion of Lewis Hamilton's realistic chances to win a championship against Leclerc? I think against Leclerc, very difficult, very difficult. I think in a reasonable Ferrari, good chance to win races this year, and just enjoy that. Enjoy that. If Lewis wins races this year, celebrate it, because it's a brilliant thing if he does it. But I don't believe, all things being equal, i.e. Charles doesn't have any issues of his own, that he could beat Charles over a season. So there we go. And he's telling everybody, Senator, is saying, no more questions about what will happen. Let's wait and see what happens on observation. I think you're right. Yeah. Claude, Drew C says, MV's NX, chance of Kyalami return with recent events? Well, that's an interesting point, isn't it? It's all about money, though, isn't it? It's all about money. And of course, there's still more money in the Middle East than anywhere else. So Bahrain and Saudi would be more able to restage their races the back end of the year, which is an expensive thing to do, reschedule everything, than the South Africans would be to put up all the money they need to have a round at Kyalami, I think. I hope I'm wrong, because I'd love to see a race in South Africa again, having been to that country so many times and raced there and won there with the team. It'd be wonderful to go back there. But at the moment, I still think Formula One will it's so obsessed with the Middle East and the money that comes out of there that they just won't be able to pull themselves away without any sort of real struggle. So anyway, where are we going? There's a lot of chat amongst yourselves on these ones, so I don't feel that guilty. I'm happy that you guys are all chatting amongst yourselves. Ryder says, I think Ferrari will win on Sunday. Well, there we go. Let's wait and see. I think they could. And wouldn't that be a brilliant thing? Great start to the year after everything else happened. But for that to happen, all the Merc teams have got to have real problems, haven't they? Unless it's sort of semi-wet and Lewis and/or Charles are brilliant off the line on slicks and everybody else has to come in or whatever. I don't know if you're allowed to do that these days. I'm still confused about that. And they disappear and win the race, sheer just using the conditions well, which is quite capable. Both drivers are very good at that sort of thing, definitely. So let's have a look at some other... Mickey Cypher says, without MGUH to electrically spool the turbo, how are the manufacturers preventing turbo lag when the MGUK is already maxed out, trying to fill that gap? Smaller turbos, that's what they're doing. And I think you can use something else. I can't remember what it was now. Mark said there is, or Scarbs, there's something else you can do now with the turbo lag to offset the turbo lag. Something to do with energy harvesting as well, I think. Tamako Road says, Lando says George is the preseason favourite. Well, I think that's quite good. That's reverse psychology, isn't it? And if I was Lando, that's what I would say. I never understand boxers when they're doing that thing and they say, I'm the greatest, I'm going to win this guy's an idiot. Wouldn't it be much better if he said, no, this guy's going to absolutely destroy me. He's got no chance at all. Because the minute it doesn't go your way, you're completely discombobulated, aren't you? And so George is nothing. Oh, Lando thinks I'm going to be world champion. I've lost the first race. What's going to happen now? Lando's just beaten me. What does this mean? So it's quite a clever move by Lando to say that, I think. So there we go. Energy harvesting. Walter Roll, 964 Kuplov. This captured my eye. Walter Roll is one of those field drivers. He was bored on multiple lap circuits, but whenever they made him race in non-rally cars, he was right up there. Nicky Lauda had huge respect for him. Yeah, massive respect for Walter Roll as well. What a star. What a great driver. I wonder if Sebastian Ogier is that sort of guy as well. We've never really seen him do anything outside a rally car, have we? It'd be interesting to know how he would go, because he's obviously got amazing feel and he's very, very good. And whether he's precise and as systematic as Walter Roll is another matter. But I remember Carlos Reutemann idolized Walter Roll and used a lot of his rally techniques as inspiration for when he was driving the Williams Formula One car. So Max Flashart's giving us a breaking news update. US citizens advised to evacuate most countries in the Middle East earlier today. Yeah, I'm not surprised for that. So there we go. Max says, I used to live in Muscat, Oman. This is not a short-term thing. That's bad news. Tamako says, perfect time to replace Qatar with a French Grand Prix. Yeah, bring back the French Grand Prix. Bring back the German Grand Prix as well. Preferably not Hockenheim. Hope everyone is going well, safe in chat. Thank you very much. Wayland Vids. Thanks for the latest content, Peter. Honestly, it's been very enjoyable. Thank you. Sick of the Sky News. I won't put the BS in, except for Ted's notebook. That's also great. Well, yeah, Ted Kravitz, good bloke. I think, as Ryder says, I think Aston have been too aggressive with the placement of electric battery. Yep. As I say, if they have, it's a problem, isn't it? Because Adrian won't have built in sort of 3 optional positions for the battery on his car, that's for sure. Harmonic imbalance, Honda should call in Yamaha. Yeah, they did a good job, didn't they? They make incredible musical instruments too, Yamaha, which probably has a, says a lot about them as a company. I've got a Yamaha motocross bike as well. There you go. Formerly owned by Matthew Sumner. Yeah, Sting. There you go. On the green logbook. Honda engineers' vision clashed with Newey engineer vision. Did they? Or did Newey just not know what the Honda engineers' vision was? He took it for granted. I don't know. There's something weird going on there. I tell you, there is something weird. So, Iggy, if the Middle East Grand Prix do get cancelled, what tracks would you like to see replace them? Well, certainly a French Grand Prix at Ricard, definitely. German Grand Prix at Nürburgring. What else? Oh, bring back Sepang, Malaysia. Yeah, why not? Turkey, maybe. Yeah, Turkey. Another good circuit. Lots of good tracks out there. Ready to stage Grand Prix, I would imagine. Money to one side. I mean, potentially, if they do that, they're going to have to, then Liberty are going to have to bail out those races. And Liberty, I think, will always want to try and have the Middle East races postponed. That'll be their policy, because that's what they want. They make a lot of money for the teams, A and B. It's less money they will have to spend if they don't hold those races in the Middle East. That's my take on that. Let's have a look. So, and let's have a look. Peter Oshkosh, this is from Digital Lauritsen. Peter, Oshkosh, Wisconsin here. Wow, sounds like a great place. Been to Milwaukee couple of times, but not to Oshkosh. Anyway, happy to catch your netcast in real time. I recall you from the days of Williams. Yep, absolutely. Long time ago. We've both grown old. Well, yeah. Poor Alonso is all I can say about Aston Martin's woes. Yeah. Not a great thing from Fernando's point of view, because the one time he does finally get an Adrian Newey car, it's reeked. It's racked with problems, and most of the problems at the moment appear to be around his least favourite engine supplier, Honda, with whom he had a run in the McLaren days. So not happy days right now for Fernando, I don't think. So Siggy says, Aston obviously made a mistake when they hired Newey and not Claude. Yeah, let the AI do the whole thing. Why not? So D. Jotman. A lot of people are saying Honda lost key people to Red Bull powertrains, but they developed and made the engine in Japan. Did Red Bull powertrains hire people from Japan? That seems unlikely to me. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a lot of I think a lot of people are saying a lot of the Honda people changed, and that's the problem. I don't think that's a problem at all, because Honda people always change, and it should not be a problem. The methodology of Honda has never changed, and that is the thing that needs to be managed, and that's what Adrian and Andy Cowell didn't do. So anyway, there we go. Let's have a look at some others. Ryder says, Peter doesn't seem to understand it. It's been very rash from Adrian's side. He came in very late to design the car. Yeah, but whose fault's that? You don't come in late and do a car like that. If you're coming in late, you make it incredibly soft landing. You don't come down with a very, very short landing strip, do you? And so I don't have any sympathy for that. And as much as, of course, Adrian has to say, well, I had a very late start because I had all that gardening leave, wasn't it? Of course he has to say that. But do you really think they do nothing at that time? Do you really think that he wouldn't have been talking to Phil Prue and a few others about how Honda are working now at Red Bull Powertrain and what's going on? Of course he would have. And, you know, I don't have any sympathy for that at all. That from the minute he left Red Bull, that is the minute the clock is ticking. And yeah, he's not sitting there drawing. I agree with you, but a lot of other things are going on. And actually the things that I'm talking about, i.e. managing the infrastructure of Honda and how it's actually working and what they're planning to do and not do, all that stuff is, very easy to do the minute you walk out of Red Bull. So I'm sorry, I don't actually agree with that, right? I know what you're saying, but I think, Adrian, if that's the case, he did absolutely nothing and his brain went into neutral for 6 months, then yeah, he's got himself to blame. Honda are usually bad in the first year after a reg change. No worries. Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll be right in a year or two, but that doesn't help Fernando Alonso, does it? Tobacco says, my first Grand Prix was 83 Zandvoort. Wow, brilliant. So that was the height of the Renault turbos, mega around there with the Michelins. Very good, very good. Right, where are we going? Lots of questions. Quite a lot of them from the same people. Max Flashheart, thank you very much. Ninja Fish, Keki Rosberg, DDDD. Yeah, well, there you go. Murphy CCS. Hi, Peter. Jeremy from Sydney here. Love to hear your recollections. Been watching Formula One since Alan Jones won. Keep it up, as we can all learn from your deep experience. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about Jonesy the other day, and much, kind of forgotten world champion in a way, isn't he? And how good a job he did in 1980, winning the world championship in the Williams. And he was just super quick. I mean, he was George Russell quick, Alan Jones. He really, really fast. And Carlos was in awe of him and in the other car, and he was particularly fast corners. He was just brilliant. And I knew Alan right from his early days in Formula 3 through Formula Atlantic, knew him very well all the way up. So it was a great ride with him. And the thing that I think a lot of people forget is how Williams then took that Formula One car to Calder, of all places, in Victoria, and he won the Australian Grand Prix back end of that year. That was your first Formula One race, if you like, in the Australian Grand Prix. And then Roberto Moreno winning all those Australian Grand Prix in the route Formula Atlantic car. And the drivers they used to get there, Jacques Lafitte, Didier Pironi, Bruno Giacomelli, they all went out to Australia. It was absolutely bizarre time. Bob Jane, I think, was doing most of the promotion then. Good on him. Yeah, but AJ, yeah, good man. And I love AJ because he's so much calling a spade a spade. He doesn't have, he doesn't have long sentences. Everything's just like, yeah, right, yeah, well, what would he know, mate? Yeah, right on. And it's just perfect. You don't need all that verbose rubbish that we get now in press releases from teams. I'd love to see a press release with a driver's quote and it's just 3 lines, 3 words actually. That would be much more usable. Jotma, why were there non-championship races in Formula One in the past? Could that ever happen again? Now that Formula One cars are slower, I wonder. Well, it should happen again because there are so many drivers out there and there's so much stuff out there. There's so many cars, they all test old cars and stuff and so many drivers. Of course it could. But the people who've got the championship are paranoid that the new championship will take some of their money. That's the problem, and Formula One needs to get a life and just say, right, we need to just have a second championship now. We will own it. We will help promote it, but we'll have new sponsors, new TV rights, everything else, and we'll make it happen. And it's a good thing. Yeah, of course it's a good thing. And it's a good thing under the heading of why non-championship Formula One races were also a good thing. And that's because it was in countries and cities and places and circuits where they didn't have the money or the opportunity to put on a world championship race, but nonetheless, they wanted to put on a Formula One race. And if you want to encourage new countries to come into the world championship, like India, like South Africa, like more countries from South America, like more countries from Asia, the best way to do that is to have this championship just below Formula One, let them sell it to the public, let the Indian Formula One Grand Prix happen for a couple of years, and then make it a world championship race. It's very logical. And build up a few Indian Formula One stars while you're doing it. Daruvula was very good. Formula One took no interest in him whatsoever, Johan Daruvula, And Vijay Mallya did a lot for that guy's career, I think. And now, I don't know what he's doing, but very, very talented guy that should have been in Formula One and would have been an Indian driver in Formula One. And no team gave him an opportunity. Terrible. And they just don't think laterally like that. And in the old days, yeah, of course, we had Brands Hatch would have the British Grand Prix, but it also put on the Race of Champions because it was a good thing to get the fans fired up at the start of the year and see all the new Formula One cars. You know, Dan Gurney won the Belgian Grand Prix '67, but his first Formula One win was the Race of Champions. Mike Spence won the Race of Champions, never won a Grand Prix, but at least he won the Race of Champions. Chris Amon won the Daily Express International Trophy in a March. Max says Callie was unlucky in the Oceania New Zealand Grand Prix. Yeah, well, sickness. I think it's the jury's out on Callie. That's another thing. I just assumed he'd be really good, but at the moment it looks very difficult for him. Getting ill and not doing a lot of running and blah blah blah. So anyway, let's get right to the bottom. Where are we? Vinayak says Jahan faded really badly after his first season. He did Formula E for a season, but then couldn't find the funds to keep racing. Yeah, that's right, because Formula One didn't get behind him. And if we'd had an Indian non-championship Formula One race, he would have been in that race and he would have been able to raise more money. And the Formula One needs to have India, I think, on the World Championship. And I'm just saying he had the latent talent to be there. I know he ran out of money as ever. He shouldn't have needed to have to find all that money. A team should have helped him find that money in India. That's what should have happened. Irish question from TCK. Peter, what's your thoughts on Eddie Jordan and his place in Formula One history? Well, right now he's doing a better job than the people he sold the team to, isn't he? I know there have been a few layers since then, but wow, what a job he did. I mean, Eddie was just, he loved his racing. You could talk to him for hours, wherever. He loved racing people. He had a very good feel for people who were real racers, like Gary Anderson, good example. And yeah, I've always got on very well with Eddie. I really miss him, actually. Nothing, a few things enjoyable in life. One of them was having a cup of tea with Frank Durney, Patrick Head, Frank Williams in the office. That was always a golden moment. Another was knocking on the door of the Jordan motorhome and finding Eddie in there on his own with his laptop and sitting down having a beer with him. You know, that was also a really nice moment. Yeah, anyway. I'm going to take one more question now and then we're going to have to wind it up, guys. But it's been a great live stream. Thank you very much. Vignac says, so will we be done with these power unit regs within 3 seasons? They seem to be quite a PR disaster for Formula One. Well, it'll be interesting to see what Formula One, what it's like after 3 years and whether they've lost viewers, whether they're continuing to grow exponentially. Knowing Formula One, they'll be doing all they can to encourage Lewis and his other half to get to every Grand Prix, to give maximum television exposure to the pit lane and the back of the Ferrari garage rather than what's going on the track, probably. I shouldn't be saying cynical things like that. Max says, what a great community you're building here, Peter. Chat is quality, nice work. Thank you very much. Well, thank you everybody who's taken part, because it's always a privilege to have all these questions coming in. I never take them for granted, never. And you know, it's an interesting show, isn't it? Because it's just me at the moment, obviously, and we've talked. The time has just flown, 90 minutes like that, which is all because of you guys. Thank you very much for that. And please, you know, if you feel like it, no hard sell here at all. But if you feel like it, have a think about the membership and the backstage we're now doing on the channel, because that's important for me, because it allows me to start remunerating some of our guests in a way that's appropriate, and getting some new guests as well along those lines, and creating new content as well along the way. And so it's something that I think, you know, if you like the channel, hopefully you'll do that as well. But in the meantime, thanks so much for being a part of this live stream. And if you're joining us now with Mark, it was going to be ostensibly 12:30, but I'm going to have to give myself 15 minutes to get set up for the next show. So we'll get on with it then. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Stay safe. I shouldn't say that with a smile anymore. Stay safe, and see you at the weekend when we do our 3 usual Grand Prix reports from Friday, Saturday, Sunday in Melbourne. Take care.